The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 175, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don Higgins, I'm Terry Peer. Don, it's right at the end of June. Number one, it's almost velvet season, and you're getting ready to put cameras out. But the whole theme of this episode today is giving an update on food plots because we've had some successes and we've had some struggles this year. Let's just break down what's been going on. Obviously, a lot of it's due to the drought and the lack of rain. But it seems like a lot of people are in the same boat. So I think today we'll just both break down all the different products we planted, why some of them worked, why some of them have struggled, and what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, well, the drought's still going on here in central Illinois. So hopefully we get some rain. We got a chance here the next day or so. We got a front moving through. I think it's Sunday. It's supposed to be 90. The next 2 days and then drop off to about 80. So hopefully that front comes through and brings some rain with it, but we'll see.
Yeah. So I think most of central Ohio got rain today. We've gotten rain over the last week. And even when we didn't have rain, we had really, really heavy dews every morning. So even when you came out, even though it had not rained, your car was all wet and moisture everywhere. So even a little bit like that helps. Let's talk a little bit about give an update of your corn, your clover, your beans, and your miscanthus. How's it reacted to the weather? What's the status of everything?
Well, as far as my corn goes, the NutriCrave looks fantastic. We've got rains when we were really stressed and needed it. We would get a decent rain, and we'd go 2 or 3 weeks without one, and we get another good rain, and it's kept it going. If it start raining like it needs to, I would have a fantastic crop of corn. I mean, my corn's waist high. Herbicide did fantastic. I got few weeds. I got some grasses coming in, but not much. And that corn's tall enough now that it's gonna shade out those grasses for the most part. But the corn looks fantastic. The test corn, I had the 20 different varieties of seed that was sent to me. Well, actually, Dwayne got it, and from our corn breeder. And these are 20 varieties that are so limited, they would only send us 100 seeds of each variety. Right. And I planted that right behind my house. And actually, I got a sprinkler going on it now. It's up waist high. In fact, I got sprinklers on tripods, that are up out of the ground 4 feet or so, or off the ground 4 feet or so. And this is probably the last time I'm going to be able to water because that corn's going to be taller than the sprinkler, but it looks really, really good. So not an issue with my corn at all. My soybeans, I originally planted 60 pounds to the acre. And then they were getting wiped out. So I went back and I drilled right over the top of everything with 30 more pounds per acre. So I put 90 pounds an acre of seed down. And I got plenty of soybean plants out there, but they've been browsed down. They're real short. And I finally just figured out that it's the rabbits doing it because my soybean plot wraps around this switchgrass field, and that switchgrass field is absolutely loaded with rabbits. And if I would drive around that, with my ATV or whatever, the rabbits are out there by the dozens. And especially if you go right before dark. And, finally I figured out it's the rabbits doing that. But those beans are just on the verge. We'd get a nice rain, there's enough of them out there now, and they've got enough size on them that they would explode if they'd get a good rain. And I've already sprayed them with Roundup. I don't know, it was a week or so ago, and they're totally weed free. Looks fantastic. They just need rain and get big enough that the rabbits aren't just totally, keeping them mowed down.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about corn herbicide a little bit. Last year, we talked about on the podcast, you sprayed Residual. This year, you used a different chemical. Which one did you use?
Sure Shot.
Sure Shot. And just as a comparison, we try to bounce around and use different product. That way we can give people an idea. We were talking a little bit before on the air. You said that you don't think it was quite as effective as what you observed last year with Residual, at least as of right now. But, some of that, I don't know. Maybe you can elaborate on it. You hear people talk. Sometimes you need more moisture to activate residuals. So talk a little bit about the comparison, things that you've seen between the Residual and the Sure Shot.
Well, they both work, no doubt about it. And the difference I'm seeing could possibly be the weather, as you noted. That there's some of those residuals that require a rain within 10 days or a week or whatever. And the difference I'm seeing is the Residual did a fantastic job on everything. But this year with the Sure Shot, it did really good on all the broadleaf weeds, but I'm starting to see some grasses come in, and I don't think it handled the grasses quite as well. But again, that could be the weather. So
yeah, the bad part about it is when it leaves the grasses, we really don't have a lot of options. There is some post-germination herbicides you can spray on non-GMO corn that people ask us about all the time, but like 2,4-D is not going to kill the grasses. It's going to kill the broadleaf. So it's a little bit different. This year I tested a different one. I went with Stalwart. I hope I pronounced that right. It's Stalwart. And for those who are watching on YouTube or maybe saw the thumbnail, the picture of the cornfield that is on that thumbnail is actually my NutriCrave. Now, you said your corn is about waist high. Mine's probably a few inches behind that. I got it in, I think, about a week later than you did. But I'm telling you what, from what I saw this year in my plots, I don't have hardly anything in there. A farmer might not be happy with a little bit of weeds here and there, grasses, but for a food plotter, I've been extremely happy with where I used that Residual. And last year I used Harness Extra. I think this worked better than the Harness Extra last year.
Well, again, it could be weather related, but
right.
The key is you got to use a residual herbicide. I got a couple calls this week from guys that planted their NutriCrave and now they got a weed patch and they want to know what to spray on it. Well,
yeah,
and you can spray 2,4-D, but that 2,4-D actually affects that corn plant to some degree as well. It'll make it do some funky things. And if you're going to spray 2,4-D, you need some nozzles that go down between the rows, and you're not just drenching your corn plant, or you're going to have a funky looking mess out there. I learned that the hard way years ago. But the residual herbicides are so critical. And we've been preaching on that for a few years now, that the days of just planting your plot and then going out there later and spraying something over the top of it are pretty much over. If you want to have good soybeans and corn, you need to get a good residual program.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it. We talked about it before. Roundup still kills everything in my area, and there's some areas on my farm where I want beans and corn together, so I can't use a residual. But I'm telling you what, I went out there actually tonight after work. I went and sprayed my soybeans, and the area that I didn't use a residual on has velvet leaf, like almost looks like AstroTurf out across that. Now, luckily, the Roundup will kill it, and I'm okay. But we talk about browse pressure. I was a little kind of worried about a week and a half ago when I went out and saw my soybean plot just looked awful. Very little soybeans being shown. And I looked from a distance to the utilization cage, and the utilization cage didn't look very good either. And so I thought, man, it can't be browse pressure. Something's wrong. Did I screw up and spray something I didn't? But when I really got to looking at the timing and everything, I think what happened in my area is I got the planting done right before that moisture. We got rain, within a couple days of when I planted. I had good germination. I think I planted 70 pounds to the acre, so maybe 75. Broadcast and dist them in like I always do, put some corn in it, but they cut the alfalfa and we went and turned dry, and that alfalfa didn't bounce back, and everything went to the bean field to eat. And so I just got demolished with browse pressure from deer and turkey. And when I say turkey, when I went out there last night or tonight, Don, there was over 60 birds in the field, in the alfalfa and the bean field. So your rabbits and my turkey are absolutely devastating. So,
Well, speaking of turkeys, I lost my turkeys.
yeah, they're
I don't
not
know
there
what
anymore.
happened to them. Nope. I don't know if I got so many stinking coons running around. I don't know if they got the nest because those turkeys were here when they should have been making nest, and then they disappeared. And I was seeing them around the edge of that switchgrass. I figured they had nest in that switchgrass, but literally you can sit during hunting season in the afternoon or evening right before dark. You'll just see herds of raccoons come out of my switchgrass, and I don't know if they're just laying out there or what they're doing. But Kyle Harmon will tell you, he was at my place one time, and this string of coons came out of the switchgrass, and it was just one after another, after another, after another.
Yep.
And I suspect that the coons or possums or something got the turkey nest, and then they left after that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to just keep an eye out. I can loan you a few, that's for sure. So,
Well, I'm not too brokenhearted about it.
well, at least for right now, if we get rain, hopefully both of us will come back with a decent bean crop. The one thing I did in the break between the rain is, if I had a drill, I really need to invest in a drill. But there were some beans there. I didn't want to till it up and replant. It was too late for that. So I went and hooked up to my corn planter and just changed the plates in my corn planter and ran 3 bags of beans over my existing bean field. So even on 30-inch rows, hopefully they'll take off. They had germinated when I went there tonight and sprayed. So if I hit the if I hit the weeds back and we get some rain, hopefully get some decent beans this year. And if not, we just I think we'll both be probably putting in a fall plot, don't you think?
Yeah, I've shared this story before, and I think it's probably worth sharing again in light of the fact that we're all going through a drought. But back in 2012, I learned something really impressive about soybeans. And, I went on a moose hunting trip to Alaska at the 1st of September, and that drought was, it was dry as I've ever seen it in my entire life. And my soybeans looked pathetic. They were, I don't even know if they was knee high, and this is the 1st of September, maybe knee high. And they were so sparse, you could see the soil around the plants and everything. And while I was gone for 16 days. And when I came home, a hurricane had pushed a bunch of rain up our way and into the drought there in September. And when I came home, I swear those soybean plants literally tripled in size in 16 days. So, if you got a good stand of soybeans right now, they're putting on root. They're looking for moisture. Right. And when you do get the rain, they can put on a lot of growth in September. Well, depending on the soybean, and the maturity of that soybean that you plant. But I know where I'm at, the real world Gen 2 soybeans, that they can put on a lot of growth in September. So
right.
Don't give up on your soybeans.
Yeah, it's way too early to freak out or give up. Miscanthus. Let's talk a little bit about miscanthus. When I was at your place 2 weeks ago, the existing mature miscanthus, the new shoots had already grown up, maybe shoulder to head high, 5 to 6, 7 feet tall. They're filling in nice. My miscanthus that I planted this year that I was worried about, just in the last week, there's sprigs and shoots coming out everywhere from those rhizomes. So everybody who planted this year, that's been worried about those rhizomes dying, there's not a lot we can do about it, but even just 1 week with several rains, it really helped those. And I'm guessing that those rhizomes were doing the exact same thing. It was working underground the whole time, wasn't it?
Right. And my miscanthus, my established miscanthus right now is every bit of 8 foot tall. It's definitely way over my head. And the new planting that I did, I mean, it looks sad. It's probably got, last time we talked about it, I think I said I had maybe at the best 10% germination or sprouting, whatever you want to call it. I would say now that number is probably bumped up to maybe between 15 and 20%. So they're coming on really, really slow, but that's another thing you can't give up on. Like you said, Terry, those rhizomes are down there and they're sprouting and they've got enough rain. Mine have had 2 good rains on them, an inch and 9/10 and an inch and 3/10. So I know that that ground is sealed up and there's moisture down there. And my past experience is that you have no idea what you got out of your miscanthus, even the first year. Even when we go into the fall and you think it's terrible, you've got 10%. I promise you, whatever you think you've got at the end of the first year, you got significantly more than what you think you do. And I've seen it on not only my farm, but other places it's been planted in the area, that it just keeps coming. So don't give up on your miscanthus either.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and listen to their spot from Osseo. But when we come back, we're going to dive into clover a little bit because both of us have been pretty disappointed with clover this year. We've both struggled with our clover plots, and let's talk a little bit about that and what our plans are for clover as we approach the fall.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear, prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. Well, thanks to the folks at Osseo. Make sure you're watching their social media and also the Mission Whitetail podcast that Joe Miles puts on. Don, let's talk a little bit about clover because both of us have been pretty disappointed. Our frost seeding did not take off like we wanted to. Talk a little bit about your theory on why and what's going on.
Well, I have no doubt why is this drought actually started last fall. We got good rains here last summer, but about August last year, the corn crop was mature, it was drying down. And about that time, the rains just stopped. The farmers in my area, they didn't even have a break from harvest because there was no rain. They started harvest. Yeah. They just kept right on going.
Yep.
And this drought actually started last fall. So bad timing on my part. Last fall, I sprayed and killed off a lot of my clover fire breaks to start over. They was getting so weedy and everything. I just thought it was best to start fresh. So I killed them. I no-tilled in the seed. I got a fair at best stand last fall. So I went in and I figured I wouldn't get a great stand. I was going to go in this spring and frost seed on top of that and, end up with a great stand, I thought, because frost seeding has always worked so well. And the fact that I was starting with a good seed bed that was free of weeds and everything, basically all I had was the rows that drill had put in with some bare ground in between. And this spring, we just didn't get the moisture and the ground conditions for frost seeding the clover. And the same thing happened in my yard. I got the new yard and it's got some bare spots that I was trying to fill in. I seeded them twice this spring and I still don't have hardly anything in those spots. So it had to be the weather conditions for it to be the clover and the grass both. But the clover was so thin, I started getting some weeds coming on this year. So here a week or so ago, I sprayed all those new clover plantings, and I sprayed with clethodim to kill the grasses that were coming on, and also with 2,4-DB, which you can spray on your clover and it'll kill broadleaf weeds but won't kill your clover. So I mixed those two chemicals and sprayed, and I got a really good kill on the leaf or the weeds. I had a lot of mare's tail coming in, and it hammered that, and the grasses are turning yellow and brown now. So I'll go in there and I'll mow that here in another week or so. And then this fall, I will go back in with the Genesis drill, and I will drill in some more clover seed. Then next spring, I will frost seed in some more clover seed, and eventually I'm going to have a good stand of clover again.
Well, I think you're spot on about your drought starting last year. I'm kind of addicted to all the big farming YouTube channels. I really like watching all the technology that these big farmers use with, the huge equipment and everything. And I remember every year they were fighting fall harvest, getting stuck in the mud and, stuck grain carts and everything else. And last year they just zipped right through and didn't hardly even have to clean their machinery. There wasn't any mud in it. So I think you're spot on. I just think the lack of moisture in the ground all through the winter. We didn't get a lot of snow through this winter. We got that really, really cold snap around Christmas where we had, minus 30, 40 wind chill that lasted about 3-4 days. But I didn't plow snow once here in Kentucky. So I just think that we lost all moisture and never got a lot back.
I agree 100%. That's exactly why we're in the situation we are now. Lack of ground moisture from last fall through the winter. And that's why the frost seeding didn't work near as well as it typically does. So
yeah, it's hard for us in our position because everybody wants to blame the seed. But like Dwayne Hopkins says, we can have the best germination seed out there. If Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, it doesn't matter what you have. So we're still at that mercy.
Yep. Well, there's nothing wrong with the seed. I mean, when you sell seed in lots of 10,000 pounds in a lot, and one guy or two guys in one geographic region have an issue, but nobody else that bought part of that 10,000 pound lot had an issue, it's not the seed.
Well, before we move on, you mentioned that you're going to mow, and both of us have kind of taken a break from that outside of mowing hay. And here in the next couple weeks, I don't know about you, but I got a lot of cleanup to do on my farm. I'm going to start bush hogging a little bit and getting some areas prepped now that those fawns are big enough that they'll scurry away from your tractor if they're bedded down. But I still am going to watch pretty close.
Yeah, and there can actually be some fawns born a little bit later. Where I'm going to be mowing, it's just that clover, it's pretty short, so there won't be a fawn in there. If there is, I'll easily see it. But I'm going to be mowing with a lawnmower, not a tractor. I'm going to be sitting on Robin's 0 turn mowing that clover.
Yeah. So so that was what I was trying to tee up on. We talk about these does that get bred a little bit later because they might be yearling does getting of size. So it's not uncommon to see a fawn, further out this summer. You still got to be careful, but I'm going to be starting to bush hog here probably about 4th of July before getting the trail cameras out. It stinks when you haven't mowed and you get about 12,000 pictures of a piece of foxtail blowing in front of your camera.
I've had that happen. So,
yeah. Well, real quick, why don't we talk a little bit about some news that you have about your Ohio property that you wanted to share with everybody?
Yeah. So, I think I mentioned on social media here a while back that I had an Ohio property that probably going to be coming up for sale later this summer. Well, my partner and I decided we're going to try something different this time. We've actually contracted with a real estate group, Kaufman Realty, out of Eastern Ohio, and we're going to have an auction in August on this property, absolute auction. So there's no reserve. We're going to see how it goes. May never have another auction in our lives, but we're going to test the waters with this property. So it's 174 acres in Washington County, Ohio. It's absolutely going to be ready to roll whenever you buy it. I'm actually going this week to Ohio to put 2 360 blinds up on plots, putting 2 feeders out and putting feed in those feeders, and putting mineral out and putting some cameras out to see what's there. But anybody that's interested, I'll be sharing info on my social media, I'm sure, but Kaufman Realty will too. I'm not sure when the listing will go up, but this auction will be in August. So if you're looking for a hunting property for this fall, this one's going to be ready to roll.
Well, speaking of auctions, last week or the week before, we had our friend Todd Ewing on to talk about a property, and he called me Thursday and he said, Terry, I told everybody on your podcast to watch this listing, that this auction could possibly go dirt cheap. And he said, sure enough, it went so cheap, he ended up buying it. So,
Yeah.
he said it was cheaper than even he thought it was going to go. So it's just proof, folks, that when we bring these properties or talk to you about it, if you're interested in the property, it might go high, but you never know. It could be a steal that you don't want to walk away from.
I talked to Todd today. I actually went and spent a day with him and Al Foster and Joe Johnson this week. But today I talked to Todd, and he told me that property had only brought like a little over $1,000, $1,050, or $1,025 or something.
Something
he said it
really
was so
low.
cheap, I had to buy it. Yeah, he said I had to buy it.
So
yeah,
make sure you're following this stuff. So, but yeah, it went cheap just like he said it would. So pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
You got anything else before we move on to listener submitted questions tonight?
I think I'm good. The first one comes from Grady Hostetler from Sugar Creek, Ohio. He says, hey, Don and Terry, would you recommend supplemental feeding this time of year? If so, what would the deer benefit from this? My second question is, what are some ways to prepare your fall plots such as Deadly Dozen? Thanks. Grady, if I could supplemental feed on my farms, no matter where they're at, if it was legal, I would do it every single day it's legal. And the deer are not going to eat near as much in the summer as they will in the winter. But if they're craving some nutrient that could be found in your supplemental feed that they cannot find in their natural diet, it's there for them. It don't take that much extra effort. And again, they're not going to eat but a fraction what they would eat out of that feeder in the winter. So definitely do it just to, on the chance that they might need some of the nutrients that's in your feed that they can't find elsewhere in their range. The next question on preparing.
Before you move on to that, I have an observation, and I don't have Bronson Strickland data to back this up. But, Kentucky changed their supplemental feeding rules this year, so I still haven't been able to put feed out. And we used to be able to feed except during turkey season, and I think 30 days before turkey season or something like that. But for the most part, outside of turkey season, we were allowed to feed. Don, the mineral intake that they've consumed is higher than normal because I'm used to feeding our complete feed that has the mineral ingredients and the Expect Healthy Deer technology in it. The mineral consumption, I think, is up a little bit, but the 2 trail cameras that I left out from turkey season when Al and Joe were here, I've noticed a lot of insects on the deer, ticks and flies. And I got to believe that we're not getting enough into those deer that what I used to be, with the contents of that maximizer. The intake just isn't as high as it would be, that we're not repelling as many of those insects as what I'm used to. And, I don't have statistical analysis. It's just a gut feeling based on the deer that I'm seeing. And it might be the dry, weather could be a factor in it. I don't know. But I'm sure seeing a whole lot more insects, and I'm wondering if it's not tied to me not being able to feed as much.
You say they really increase their mineral intake. I've had 3 or 4 different guys say the same thing, that their deer have really increased mineral intake this year. And I wonder if the drought might have something to do with that. If the nutrient content of the plants that they're consuming is not as high, so they're craving that mineral more. But you're probably the 4th or 5th guy that I've heard say that. A couple guys in Iowa, for example, said the same thing.
Well,
But
if the plants aren't getting the fresh growth to pull those nutrients out of the ground and they're getting it through browse, Dr. Strickland talks about this all the time. They'll go and adjust their diet based on what they need.
yeah, speaking of Dr. Strickland, we should probably announce that he's going to be on. We're going to have Dr. Strickland on here in next month or so. So if anybody's got questions for Dr. Strickland, you can address them right to him and submit them, and we'll save them for the episode when he's on. But Grady had another question there about
how do we prepare our fall plots for deadly dozen?
The best thing you can do, Grady, is keep the weeds down, whether that is spraying or continually working the ground or whatever. You just need to keep that vegetation down, or you're going to have to deal with it later when it comes planting time. So I've got a plot on another property here in Illinois that I didn't plant a spring plot there. I've went in once already and sprayed that plot to kill the weeds down. And in fact, I need to go check it again and probably spray it again just to keep the weeds suppressed. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to no-till with the Genesis drill right into that plot that I've kept sprayed all summer long. But the key is keeping that vegetation down.
Yeah, I have just under a half acre of soil charge that I'm going to convert half of it into Dixie Dozen, half of it into Deadly Dozen this year. I took a picture of it tonight when I was there, and it looks phenomenal. So in that case, I'm trying to build the health of that soil, get some organic matter, nitrogen back in it, but I'll spray that in August and have it ready to plant Deadly and Dixie Dozen in around rain around the 1st of September. So my soil charge looks phenomenal. Actually, if I remember before I upload this video for the people watching YouTube, I'll put a picture of the soil charge up on here, and the deer are absolutely smoking it. So I probably, if I would have known about this drought, I probably would have been better to put a little bit bigger area into soil charge, because it's handled the lack of moisture so much better than anything else I planted. And I planted everything the same weekend.
Yeah, if we would have got Grady's question 2 months ago, I would have said you need to plant soil charge. But at this point, we're towards the end of June. By the time he plant it, the 1st of July, and then it comes up, he's going to be ready to terminate it before it's ever mature. So at this point, you just keep the vegetation down.
Yeah, there's 3 options here for what situation people are in. If nothing's been planted at all in that area in the spring, keep the weeds at bay and keep it back so you're not fighting a mess, after you plant your Deadly Dozen. If your spring plot failed and you don't have anything there due to the drought, you shouldn't have a lot of weeds there either, but you can adjust from a spring to a fall plot strategy. And then if you were able to get some soil builder product to work, and then you're just terminating that with spray close to the time you're working ground, getting ready to fall plot. So kind of 3 different options there.
Right.
Wildlife Farming is the leading e-commerce platform specializing in habitat management equipment. Our mission is to make available the equipment necessary for the development of wildlife habitat and improve conservation for hunting and recreational property. We carry flagship brands like the Genesis Drill and Goliath Roller, as well as the premier brands in planting, mowing, spraying, forestry management, and fencing equipment. Food plot and habitat goals vary. Wildlife Farming is the company that can deliver the equipment to achieve these goals. Equipment is our specialty. Our staff is trained and familiar with all the tractor and skid steer brands to make sure you get the right piece of equipment to get the job done right the first time. At Wildlife Farming, we only sell quality equipment, and we have the support and expertise you need. Please visit wildlifefarming.com for all of your equipment needs.
This one comes from Heath from Freetown, Indiana. He says, Don and Terry, on May 26th, I woke up to find a dead doe lying next to my kid's swing set in our backyard. Went out and found she had died mid-birth, with fawn halfway out. No apparent injuries from anything else. I have never seen anything like this before, and it had me wondering if you have any input or experience with mortality rate of does while giving birth. Thanks. Heath, I have never seen or heard of anything like what you described. When I had the captive deer, I had them for 25 years. I never one time assisted a birth, witnessed a doe having a difficult birth. I'd say what you witnessed or found was extremely, extremely rare. I would guess probably less than 1 out of 1,000 whitetail births cause the death of a doe. So just a rare freak of nature is what you've seen.
I saw the pictures of this. He actually sent them to me on a private message of social media, and I don't think it's probably appropriate to post them, the video on the podcast. I don't know what we get flagged for with graphic content or whatever, but yeah, I saw it. It was literally in the guy's backyard within a couple feet of his kid's swing set, and the doe was dead. The fawn was halfway out with some of the whatever, the film and everything over the nose. So yeah, something went wonky with that delivery, and both the doe and the fawn died. But I've never, you obviously been around so many captive deer. I would have guessed that, a lot of farmers lose calves every year or lose cows, but the fact that you never saw it in the captive side surprises me a little bit.
Yeah, and I've had livestock all my life. I've pulled many calves. I've pulled many pigs back whenever I was in 4-H and FFA, and we would farrow sows. More than once I had to pull pigs, but never once in 25 years did I ever assist in the birth of a fawn.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Well, I wish I could share that picture, but I think it's best that we don't. But hope it doesn't happen too often, especially in the backyard next to the kid's swing set. That'd be a little rough, sending your kid out back and having to see that.
Next one comes from Jeremiah Kraft from Mason, Michigan. He says, hello, Don and Terry. I have listened to every single one of your podcasts. You have answered many questions. You have touched on giant ragweed a little bit. It grows all over southern Michigan. I would like for you to go into a little more depth on deer eating it and bedding in it. I would like to hear your thoughts on leaving it because it grows there naturally. I have switch on the property too. This will be the second and third year growing it. Is diverse bedding just as important as diverse food? Thanks for answering my question. God bless. Jeremiah, the deer love eating giant ragweed. And the thing of it is, though, that giant ragweed is only palatable to those deer this time of the year in the summer when it's green growing. When that plant matures and starts turning yellow and brown in the fall, it loses all its attraction in the winter time. They're not going to touch it. I would not leave that just specifically for a deer plot. I think you're going to want to plant things on your property that'll get deer through the period of time when food's in the shortest supply, and that's the winter. My whole food plot program is geared towards getting my deer through the winter, and that's when they need it most. I think that's when your food plot program can have the biggest impact on your deer herd. If they didn't have the nutrition that a serious land manager is providing in his plots, well, then they're just out roaming the countryside scavenging for food. So the giant ragweed is, in terms of bedding cover, yeah, I like diverse bedding cover. I like the wooded cover, thick wooded cover, but I also like the switchgrass. And I just don't think that a ragweed patch in the wintertime, or even late fall hunting season, I don't think that giant ragweed is going to provide near the cover, the quality of cover that switchgrass would, or that woody vegetation will. So it's definitely got its place. I wouldn't worry about wiping it out around the edge of your plots or in the woods or edge of the woods or whatever. But I would not be specifically trying to cultivate it.
So I'm not real familiar with it. How does it? I mean, I'm assuming it's a grass type weed that grows fairly tall, or is it is it woody?
It's a broadleaf, and it does grow fairly tall. I mean, it'll grow 6 foot anyway.
So what does it do when the winter comes? Does it stay standing up like switchgrass does, or does the wind and the snow and everything just lay it down?
It's an annual, so it the plant totally dies every year, roots and all.
So it wouldn't have any winter bedding advantage at all then.
Very little. I know you've seen it, Terry. It's got a stalk on it, and the deer really like it when it's young. When it's say 3 feet and below, that's when they really hammer it. When it starts getting up 5-6 feet, they're not eating it near as much because it loses its nutrients value or food value. So again, I wouldn't go on an eradication campaign, but at the same time, I wouldn't cultivate it either. There's a lot of different hundreds of plants that deer like to eat. So diversity is key, but there's some things that you should be cultivating and some things you shouldn't. And you should, like I said, you should be focusing on that time period when the deer need the food the most.
Yep. All right. Makes sense.
This is the biggest step we've taken in reducing vibration and sound since 3D damping. What will my new setup do for me that my last year setup did not? Matthews Pioneer Damping. We own silence. We own stealth.
All right, the next one comes from Anonymous from Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. He says, Don and Terry, thanks for being truthful in the outdoor industry and staying the straight path with your beliefs, especially in the mental health plagued world we're in today. My question pertains to how do you handle being called and slandered as an elitist by individuals simply for having the goals and desire to chase mature deer, even though your goals and desire have nothing to do with other individuals, and would congratulate them on whatever they harvest if they're setting a goal and working to achieve it? Well, to be honest, the question is, how do we handle this? And I honestly tell you that some days I do not handle it very well, but I'm getting better at it, I think. And I've come to realize, I think I mentioned on an earlier podcast that this summer I've been reading the Bible, reading the New Testament all the way through the New Testament. I really want to get to the book of Revelation. That's why I want to really dive in, but I wanted to read everything leading up to that. But anyway, I've come to realize that, Jesus was persecuted, the only perfect human to ever walk the earth. Every one of his disciples was persecuted. Why would I not be? I think there's reasons for me personally being persecuted, and to be just brutally honest, a lot of the fault lies on me and the way I've handled things, the way I'm outspoken. I take a stand on things. I'm not going to just say it's all the other people's fault. I've gave them plenty of ammo, but I've tried to get better, and I've tried to overlook things, and instead of getting in a lot of heated discussions like I used to on social media, I've just when I give people their voice, but when they get out of line, I just block them. And I just try to treat people the way I want to be treated. And when they decide that they're not going to treat me that way, it when it comes to a certain point, I just have to walk away from it. And I had a situation today I didn't even comment on. Somebody pointed it out to me. They sent me a message and said, "Hey, you need to go block this guy and look at what he's saying." I went, "Yeah, he needed blocked." All right. I didn't say a word to the guy or anything. I just blocked him and he's gone. That's the way I'm trying to handle it now. The ironic thing is January 1st, I made the New Year's resolution that I was not going to argue with these people. I was just going to block them. And I didn't care if I lost half of my followers on social media or whatever. And the thing of it is, I blocked people right and left for the first couple of months, and I actually gained followers. I actually gained about 1,500, 2,000 more followers by blocking people. I think people just get sick of it. And, I also have realized that people don't criticize anyone that is doing less than they are. You know what I mean? They only want to criticize people that they envy, that they are jealous of or whatever. So I almost take it as a compliment. When somebody's bashing me, they're trying to bring me down to their level. And there's been times where I went down there and I got on their level with them, and I try to avoid that anymore. But I appreciate that you've recognized some of the slander, and slander is the exact perfect word, because when people say things that are not true about someone, I call that slander. And I've dealt with I dealt with it this week even, but at some point, you just got to be thick skinned and walk away. But I really appreciate that you've noticed that. And I've had a lot of people stand up for me and have my back. And I appreciate that as well. And you people that have done that know who you are. Don't think it goes unnoticed. I absolutely notice and appreciate it. It's better for me just not to comment a lot of times.
I played in a company golf outing. I had about 140 golfers there. I think it was Wednesday. I don't know. My days are all running together. And there was a guy there that he's probably the best golfer I've ever seen that doesn't get paid to play golf, one of those type guys. Mm-hmm. And I heard some chatter over on the other side of the room, like basically accusing him of, well, he must never work. All he does is play golf. They said, he comes from a rich family that, probably had the yuppie effect. These people didn't even know him. They're just making all of these insinuations because why? He's a good golfer. And I thought to myself, it's like, this is this guy's hobby. He's probably dedicated more work than any of those guys combined ever put into it, but that's his thing. And to just be jealous because somebody else has dedicated themselves to a passion and been very successful at it and are very good at it, but then holding that against them and turning it into a negative just to, I guess, make yourself feel better that you're not as good. I thought it was kind of funny sitting back, and I'm like, well, I guess the deer hunting industry isn't so much different than everywhere else, because I think everything's the same way when people are jealous. But I thought of this morning, or not this morning, this evening. I had my earbuds in when I was spraying my soybeans tonight, and I just put a YouTube on. And of course, it plays the next video, and this country song came on that I've never heard before. And I think it's actually from a artist that you shared a song from that probably had some bad lyrics on accident one time. Yeah. I think it's the same guy. But I went and looked at the lyrics of this song, and in the chorus it says, "You can thank him, you can blame him. Either way, you're going to face him. Whether you believe in him or not, in the end, everybody talks to God." And I thought, that's pretty powerful stuff there. No matter what your position is on anything, you're going to have to face our Maker and our Savior at some point. And I hope you're ready. That's all I can say. Everybody can do what they want, but I just hope that you are ready, because it's going to come, and you're going to have that conversation and be accountable for everything. What position you're in is your business.
Everybody's going to be a believer one day. The smart people will be a believer before they die.
All right. Well, let's wrap up with our last question here of the podcast.
The last one comes from Ed from Albany, Georgia. He says, Don, I recently joined the Whitetail Master Academy. Great source of information in one place, particularly the hunting property designs. Keep them coming. I have a couple of questions for you. One, how would you classify Babe? An easy buck or a tough buck? I'm going to answer that one real quick. Babe is in the middle. He's not super easy, but he's not super tough either. I would put him right in the middle between Smokey and Trump. You guys have probably all heard me talk about how different Smokey and Trump were. Smokey was probably the easiest mature buck I've ever killed in my life. Trump was the hardest. And I'd put Babe right there in the middle. I think I'll be able to.
Do you think Babe's traveling as far as Mel?
No.
Mel was going a long way. I mean, that was part of the decision. I mean, he was going a long way in different directions. I think you were almost an intersection in his range, which was really big. Smokey didn't.
Mel would be a good comparison for Babe. Babe didn't travel as far as Mel, but Mel had some habits that made him. He wasn't super tough, but he wasn't easy either by any means. And I guess that's a kind of a roundabout way of saying I think I will get Babe killed if he's still alive. I haven't seen him all summer, so I don't know. And
you decide
if somebody else don't shoot him first. I mean, I think if I have a season to devote to the deer, I think I'll get him killed at some point. But he's neither easy nor tough. He's somewhere in the middle.
Yep. All right, I'll put the slide back up so you can read the second question.
The second one was you often discuss various fruit-bearing trees and chestnut trees as your favorite for deer. Regarding oak trees, you seem to talk about the trees that hold their leaves longer and provide cover, like shingle oak. If you had a property with few oak trees, what specific oak trees would you plant as a food source? Do deer like acorns from dwarf chinkapin oaks? The reason I ask is that I planted white oaks, swamp chestnut oaks, overcup oaks, live oaks, etc. about 15 years ago, still waiting on acorn production. Maybe you could add a video on this topic. Well, Ed, dwarf chinkapin oaks that you mentioned, deer absolutely do like the acorns, but those acorns are very tiny. And I've got a few of those on my farm that I planted years ago. And literally, I think, those trees today are probably 20 feet tall. And I would bet each tree produces no more acorns than what would fill an ice cream pail. Wow. That's not very much. I mean, these things are little. They're not a whole lot. They're about like a pin oak acorn or a shingle oak acorn. They're a little bit bigger than a pencil eraser, but not a whole lot bigger. And the volume of food is just not going to be there. The oak that I would suggest you plant for deer to feed on is swamp white oak. And I can tell you that if you would have planted swamp white oak 15 years ago, and if those trees were not crowded, they had space to branch out, they would all be producing acorns today. Whenever I had my tree nursery, we would grow various oaks, for digging and burlapping and selling. And many of the swamp white, and we would sell those trees. Typically, they would be in the field about 5 to 7 years. And those swamp white oaks, when they was 5 to 7 years old, I would say over 50% of them were producing acorns.
Wow.
That's probably the tree that I witnessed produce acorns the quickest. I know back 25, 30 years ago, the big rage was sawtooth oaks. You couldn't open a hunting magazine without somebody talking about sawtooth oaks. And the reason for it is sawtooths are native of Asia. They're not a native of the United States or North America. They come from Asia and kind of exotic, and people were bringing them in, planting them, and it's supposed to be the newest and latest, greatest thing. Well, I've got some of those on my farm too. Shame on me for not having natives, but it is what it is.
I wasn't going there. I knew you were
But
gonna do it. I was just waiting.
The swamp white oaks even beat the sawtooth oaks in acorn production at a young age. The thing that the sawtooths were touted is they would produce acorns that the deer just absolutely love, and they would do it in 5 years. Well, I'm telling you, very, 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 very few of them produced in 5 years. I would put a row of swamp whites up against a row of sawtooths any day of the week, and the swamp whites are going to blow them away in terms of acorn production and how quick they produce. And the deer prefer them just as much as they do any other acorn. Well, with the possible exception of chinkapin oak, if I had to put my finger on one acorn that I think the deer prefer the most, it would be the chinkapin oak. And but it's not a very big acorn either. It's a real small acorn. But I seen back whenever I had the tree nursery and we would collect seed to grow these trees, I would go around to various parks and cemeteries and places like that, and I would had a little thing I'd push along the ground. I'd pick up these acorns, and there was a particular cemetery where there was a big old chinkapin oak tree, and there's a lot of white oaks around it too. And those white oaks, they'd be loaded with acorns. But that chinkapin oak, it literally would look like a bunch of hogs had been under it rooting the ground. And you had a hard time finding a single acorn because the deer was there every single night cleaning up every acorn on the ground. And it was pretty obvious to me that at that location anyway, those deer much preferred the chinkapin oak to the white oak. But if you want fast acorn production, you want a tree that, or an acorn a deer really likes, swamp white oak is the ticket.
Which oak trees hold their leaves longer? Does the same ones hold their leaves? We talk about the cover even through the year. And I don't know that you've ever even brought this up, but I really like hunting out of oak trees that still have leaves on it just for cover, so you're not silhouetted as much. So if you're trying to put a tree stand somewhere or a tree somewhere that your kids might have a good place to have a tree stand down the road, does any of them hold their leaves better than others?
Definitely chinkapin oak, or not chinkapin, shingle oak and pin oaks hold their leaves the best in the winter. Now, a white oak and a swamp white oak, they will hold their leaves well into the winter too when they're young. But as they get older and mature and bigger, then they start shedding their leaves in the fall about the same time the other oaks would. But if you want to plant a tree for tree stands, I even prefer a shingle oak's the ticket there. And I even prefer a shingle oak over a pine tree or an evergreen like a cedar. You've got all the cover, but I think it's even better cover than some of those conifers where it's so thick that you got to cut branches out of the way. And by the time you cut branches out of the way, you're kind of sitting there in the wide open. I think a shingle oak is a tree that you can hide in about as well as any tree out there.
Yeah, good advice. I know we have 2 pin oaks in our front yard that are really old. The base is about the size of a hula hoop, and it seems like there's leaves on those trees even during spring green up. I don't know when they actually fall, but they stay loaded all winter long.
Yeah, the pin oak's a nice tree too. What I don't like about a pin oak is the branch structure. A lot of times those branches, instead of growing at an upward angle, they grow at a straight out and then a downward angle.
They're almost straight down because they're a pain to mow over. You get it to where you're getting slapped in the face by these trees in my front yard, but then you go and my pole saw doesn't even get to where they're attached up top. They're 20 feet up in the air, but they're slapping you in the face.
Yep. That's what I don't like about a pin oak. And also, pin oak is very susceptible to galls and also chlorosis.
Gotcha.
If the soil pH is too high, they get chlorosis and they turn yellow and they're just sickly and they usually end up dying. And then it also makes them, when they get sickly from chlorosis, it just kind of invites the wasp galls to hit them as well. So kind of a little bit temperamental, at least in this part of the world. There may be places where they do fantastic, and they will here too in the right site. But you got to be careful about where you plant them.
Well, this week we're recording on Friday night. This will come out on Saturday. Last weekend, I flew down to Myrtle Beach to watch my daughter play softball in a tournament. They won that tournament. Tomorrow we leave to go to Northern Ohio to another tournament. But a shout out to your grandson's team. If he's listening to the podcast, it looked like they won their championship. So,
yeah. We went and watched them play Wednesday evening. That was a day that both boys played back-to-back games. So one trip over there, we got to watch them both, and they won that night too. And it was last inning, grand slam home run won the game. They was actually behind by, I think it was 2 runs going into the final at bat, and
holy cow.
They loaded up the bases, and then a kid hits a inside the park grand slam.
Oh my goodness!
Ended up winning that game. That was the team that won. Oak Hill Outdoors is the team out of Covington, Indiana. So yeah, pretty proud of them boys.
Yep. So congratulations if they're listening. I know they usually listen to the podcast because we get in trouble when we don't say something very nice. We get reminded that your grandkids are listening.
Yeah, we hear about it, or I hear about it. You don't hear about it as much as I hear about it.
No, I don't hear it too much, but congratulations to the boys. What do you got planned for this week?
Well, I'm going to Ohio at some point later in the week. Supposed to close on the property, the smaller property I bought that gives me access to the new 40. Yep. I got an appointment to close on that one day. I'll be probably spraying weeds, maybe doing some mowing.
Yep.
I'm really fired up about putting my cameras out. So probably next weekend. I don't know what day the first is on. Is the first on Saturday? I think it is, isn't it?
Yes.
Probably a week from tomorrow. I'll probably start putting cameras out.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty fired up, and actually we were supposed to record this podcast, and I told you I needed 10 minutes because I got a call from my buddy, and a giant was bedded down in the alfalfa field. So I jumped on the Quiet Cat bike and hauled butt down the road on the Quiet Cat and snuck out and glassed this deer before we recorded tonight. So that's my first giant sighting of the year in an undisclosed location. It was far enough I had to ride a bike, but I didn't want my truck sitting out there where people would see me. But I'm getting pretty fired up to see what inventory is around. I need to do a little bit of mowing before I can put all my cameras out. I have to put I bought a new 750-pound feeder that I got to get together. I'm going to try to work on that in the evenings this week, and also got a new 360 blind to put together. I'm going to try, I don't know how much luck you've had with it, but I'm going to try. Kyle Harmon's talked to me about, he's done it, putting that blind together in my shop. And then since I have the tractor with the forks, hauling it to the farm versus assembling it. The beauty of these blinds is you can actually erect them and build them on the stand if you don't have equipment. But I think it's going to be a whole lot easier building this thing in my shop than having to build it out there by myself.
Yeah, I put them together inside the shed. It's a whole lot easier. You know, if you don't have equipment, that's one thing, but getting that roof on when you're putting them up, standing up and getting that roof on that blind is a challenge.
Well, this is the 7-footer too, so we like hunting out of that XL that gives you a lot more space with 2 adults in it, and that roof is just even a little bit more heavy. So I'm going to put it together here at the house and haul it over and replace one of the older blinds on my place. So that's going to be my task this week. Need to change the oil on the tractor, get ready for mowing, and try to put that stuff together. But catching up, but I'm getting excited about putting trail cameras out. There's no doubt about that.
God bless everyone. See you next week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.